Do you feel like we do?
Today on New Things, New Tech. Cool, new, old tech, a tremolo and a reverb. Let's check them out.
I want to thank you.
A while back, I tore apart an old organ which has some really cool old electronic stuff built in. Back then, they didn't have simple little electronic chips like built into this amp to create tremolo and reverb. So the engineers of the day had to get very creative to get sounds like tremolo, however you want to say it, and reverb. Check this out. This is a tremolo, which creates a wavy sound effect, which is a modulation of volume as opposed to pitch. Take a look at how this works. There's a motor here that actually drives a large drum. The drum is cut so that the sound will actually travel out through this section here. When in an organ or box or some sort of container, then it only comes out through the speaker grills on the side. On the back side is where a speaker sits, and whatever sound you pump into it will be distorted. You can control the speed of the motor by changing the AC voltage driving it. Full on, it's using 110 volts AC. I can simulate this a bit by turning it on and off again. Now this amp can essentially do the same thing by changing to a tremolo effect. A guitar, mic, or audio source connected to this will get the tremolo effect. A whammy bar on a guitar is often incorrectly called a tremolo bar. The whammy bar changes pitch of the strings and not the modulation of the volume. Just a little side note there for you. Leo Fender, when he came up with the idea back in 1954 for the Stratocaster, mislabeled the whammy bar as a tremolo, but it's really a vibrato control. Fender also referred to the tremolo circuit in his amps as vibrato. So a cool little piece of history for you. Oh, and another cool bit of history that I think is really cool is I used to work at Fender Corporation up in Scottsdale, Arizona a few years ago. I was one of the main programmers for all the shopping carts on the Fender sites and on the team that brought you the very first version of the online American Stratocaster configurator, allowing you to create the Strat of your dreams. So if you have a lot of money and want a personalized expensive guitar, go for it. My own personal plug for a really cool gig. Okay, enough about this history crap. Let's hook some things up to this tremolo and see how it sounds. I have the tremolo on top and I have connected one of my guitars to the amp. This way, the sound from the amp speaker will travel through the port here and be picked up by this mic, which just happens to be sitting on one of my custom mic stands. So check out the card link up here for that video. Playing around with a basic D chord, I get a basic melody. Nothing too exciting. Next, switching on the tremolo and playing the same basic D chord, I get something a little bit more exciting just out of this basic chord. Kind of cool, huh? Well, I think so. And would you like to carry around one of these big guys with you all the time if you had to go to a gig and want to have a nice cool tremolo effect? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. So if we switch off this tremolo and use the tremolo on the amp, we get a different kind of modulation sound. Not too bad. That's a little on the tremolo. If you like one of these for creating cool sound effects, just find yourself an old 70s or earlier organ at a thrift store for like less than 20 bucks. Rip it out and hook it up to your gear. Might be able to find something on eBay as well. Another really old school piece of tech is this reverb that came out of this same organ as well. To get reverb in a real world, you'd have to be in a really large room where the sound would bounce around or some kind of a hall or whatever else. It's not always practical. So Hammond, back in the 50s, created this type of reverb using something like this for his church organs. Fender and others adopted the use of these type of reverbs in their gear before digital reverb came along. Nowadays, reverb is just a simple chip that gets that nice echo, hall effect, or stadium effect. It's possible to still find amps and gear that use one of these spring reverb tanks. Check out how this works. There are a couple of coiled springs in here attached to input and output transducers. The sound signal travels entering this transducer, which then travels through the transmission springs. The signal bounces back and forth through the transmission springs until it exits out on the output transducer. The amount of delay is determined by the spring diameter, wire gauge, and length. The transducer on the output side creates an alternating magnetic field, so it allows the signal to bounce around quite a bit. So putting the tech aside, let's just play with this thing what we can do. Pumping in some audio, we can play around and get some really nice sci-fi sound effects, something like you'd hear in Forbidden Planets or some really other old school sci-fi film. What I have here is, on this side there is an input and an output. So I've got the input. One of the input channels is going through here, and I can get a little bit of sound. It's really quiet because I don't have this really amplified very well coming through here. It needs a lot of gain actually put through this. The audio comes in the input side here and goes through a transducer, travels through these coils, bounces back and forth like so as it sets up magnetic resonance, and then comes out this transducer and into the amplifier. But we can make some really cool sound effects like you'd see in Forbidden Planet, for example, a really old classic film. Basically, we're just creating sound effects on top of these coils. So imagine that this is in your organ, and the organ is playing music, and this is actually vibrating. No, that's way too easy. This is causing a little bit of reverb effect. This is nice to have around to make some interesting sound effects. This particular one is mono, but either with two or one designed for stereo, we could get a really nice stereo reverb. Like in my dad's old 67 Chevy, they used to have one of these, and every bump in the road would ring out, producing that nice sound effect. So if I play some music through this gets a little bit of that large room sound. And this amp can do reverb through its electronic circuit, just like most stereo receivers have a room, hall, and stadium effect. That's just a reverb. You can still buy real spring reverbs, but they are not cheap. So ripping them out of organs like I did and repurposing them is a really good idea. That's it for this edition of New Things, New Tech. I'm Scott Drudge. Let me know if you like what you've seen. I hope you'll subscribe, leave comments, and stop back now and then and see some of our videos.